Well, it is a pleasure to be here with you. I am very excited for this session. I have been waiting for so many hours to present this to you. And I finally have a machine that actually works, which is fantastic. It helps with the demos when you have one of those. So I'm very excited to show you this because the topic is, and I was curious, we're kind of like near the end of this corridor. It's the last session of the day. I was kind of wondering what the crowd might be like. This will not, if you're worried, it's not going to drag on for all eternity. It is going to be precise because really, it's really hard to make this hard. That's why there's that easier thing in the title. It's much easier. In fact, when you see some stuff, you might just go, what? Because it is that good. It's that easy to do. I would like to know, before I do anything else, just to show of hands so I can understand my audience, how many of you would consider yourselves developers? Raise your hand. That's the vast majority. Any IT folks in here? You're like primarily IT? Got a few? You're going to like this, by the way, because it's easy. That's why you'll like it. All right, well, let me make my ridiculous presentation. My name is Michael Palermo. You can follow me at Palermo4. That's my Twitter alias. Palermo4 is kind of like my call sign because my full name is John Michael Palermo IV, so I've just embraced the number 4 with everything that I do. And so Palermo4.com is obviously my site for blogging, Palermo4 at Facebook, Palermo4 everywhere. So that's kind of how I identify myself. So if you're trying to find me, just search for that. One of the things that I thought I would introduce to give you a little background about this topic and about my experience with this topic is a while back I did a Microsoft Virtual Academy session with Jeremy Foster, and it was on developing Windows apps with HTML and JavaScript. It was near the beginning of those in that era. Out of curiosity, did anybody happen to see this one? Okay, so you may know my wild ways. And that course actually at the MVA was very, very popular. Still, years later, we were still getting reviews like, wow, this was an excellent. And so if you are limited with your HTML5, one of the things I like about that one is if you're limited with HTML5, that's a good one to just get started with that. If you want to get into CSS3, HTML5, it's all kind of in there, in addition to the Windows 8 stuff. Of course, now we're moving on to bigger and better things, getting into the whole Windows 10 world. So here's the agenda for you today. It is this simple. We're just going to talk a little bit, just a little, because there's been a whole bunch of announcements and stuff, so I'm not going to repeat everything to you over and over again. But how you're going to be able to create universal Windows apps with web technologies, that's why it's in quotes. We're going to talk primarily about hosted web apps, packaged web apps, a little bit about tooling, and the web view gets a lot of attention. So I'll do another show of hands. Any already doing hosted web apps to some extent? I wonder if that'll change after this session. How about, well, a packaged web app would almost be what we have been doing, and that is everything's kind of lumped together in that package. So if you've done any Windows 8 or 8.1 development with JavaScript, that really would be kind of the same. What about using the web view? Any web view people in here? This is awesome. I mean, it's like all new stuff to you then. This is great. And then we'll also get into some tooling. I think the tooling thing is going to wow you too. I've got like all sorts of eye candy for you. So I'm going to get started. So the revolution, of course, you have seen all the announcements. This is the typical marketing slide about rah, we've got Windows 10, and we can now start doing universal apps where you build the one app and it works everywhere. So the real question as it relates to this session is, did JavaScript get left behind, or is it still a player in this universal world? And the answer is yes, it is a player. So what you're looking at here is a browser, an Edge browser. And if we start to think about what is making this new browser great, we could say it's probably one, we got the new awesome rendering engine. And two, we got the smoke and fast performance of our Chakra engine. But here's where the magician tricks happen. You think it's a browser, but it's also an app. Because did you see that switch? That's how the app looks. And you're going to see that live. You're going to see some cool things here live where it's like, yeah, it's kind of just like the same. The only thing that changed was a little bit of the edging on the screen, and that was it. So, what are the flavors? If you create packaged content, which means you're bundling all your code and your markup together in a package to upload to the store so that it's all there, then that's what we mean when we say packaged content, which means it is available offline. Now, if you do the hosted content, that would mean that it will require a connection, an internet connection to that site in order for it to work. But the advantage is whatever you have on your website is current information, and it's always updated without you having to redeploy the app to the store. So one, you would have to do more formal deployments. The other one, as far as to the store, and then the other one just sits there and gets updated as you normally would. Now, the reason why you see this little intersection going on is because that's exactly what you could do too. You don't have to choose one versus the other. It can be a blend. So you can have a degree of things that are offline, and you can have some things that would require connectivity for live content. So all the goodies are there. You could mix and match and choose. Now, I'm going to tell you, this is a slide that I created today because I've had to rebuild some machines so many times. I've learned so much about getting started with this environment, and I'd like to share it with you. First of all, the latest build of Windows 10, I think how many of you already have it installed on something? Okay, so I want to forewarn you, if you don't have it installed, I mean, if you're here for information purposes only, that's great, if you just kind of want to be in the know. But if you're like, well, I'm going to go try that right away, you're going to need Windows 10. Everything I'm going to do is requiring Windows 10 to be the operating system for you to develop, and that's a key. I didn't say it must target Windows 10. You just must develop on Windows 10. You'll see that we can target non-Microsoft platforms with what we're doing. But right now, you have to develop on Windows 10. So you'll need to install that, the latest build. I think the last two digits that I've seen so far are 74. Then you need to actually do something we haven't had to do before. You're going to have to configure your operating system to allow you to develop. That's just strange, right? But you will. Then you install Visual Studio, but don't just install it with the default settings. You have to specifically install it with certain settings turned on, or you can't do what I'm doing. So I thought, boy, I better share that because that wasn't originally in here, but if you kind of want to follow along one day, you'll probably want to know. So I am going to demonstrate some things about our environment. Probably some of this is due in part to the fact that we're still growing our Windows 10 OS. It's still evolving. Let me prove it. I'm going to go into my settings. I'm going to choose Update and Security. And look, so many of you raised your hands. And something here is special just for you. It's this thing right here that says for developers. So what does it do? Let's find out. This is exciting. Here we go. I'm going to press it. And crash. That I touched nothing. That's what it does right now. It crashes. It's like taunting you as developers. Why did it do that? Then you have to check event logs and things and try to figure it out. So the reason why it did that is because it's not ready. Now, that's been acknowledged, so I want you to see, oops, let me do it this way, that you can go into the gpedit.mcs, group policy edit.mcs. That's what you would run here at the command prompt or at this little run window. So I'm going to do that right now. And then you likely, if you're on this build, you're going to get two fascinating messages about OneDrive/SkyDrive. And you just click OK, and then, OK again. And then you go down to the administrative templates, to the Windows components, and you're going to find the one that's called App Package Development. Sadly, I know this by heart. I shouldn't. I should have to look this up on the internet and wonder, but I don't. I know it really well. And you'll notice now that there's two things that are enabled, and if you don't enable those two things, you can't play. So it's basically saying, do you have a right to build apps that you can deploy to your local machine? And can you sideload? So that's really what this is about. So you want to make sure that those two things are enabled. All you have to do is double-click it, click enabled, and you're done. Oh, now I don't have to do this with you, but I can tell you it does require a reboot. But we don't need to do that again. Okay. So let's talk first about what hosted web apps are all about. The first thing that's probably a key advantage to using a hosted web app is the fact that if you're already building a web app, if you're already in the market, like for instance, how many of you might be responsible for a website for work, intranet site, something to that effect? Anyone? So there's a few. So you have that, or you're responsible for some company's website. So you're responsible, you already have a system, you already have a workflow for how you're going to make that stuff work. You already know what editor you're going to use. You already know how you're going to make sure that you're in a source control system, and you've got usually some workflow there. You deploy to whatever service you want to deploy to, and then ultimately you can now, with all of those steps, you can make an app. I'm telling you, it's true. You'll see. We're talking about, that was a lot of complication just to say, if you are building a web app, you can build a Windows app, a universal Windows app. Now, let me define this even more clear. Think of it this way. It's a website that runs in the context of an app. That's a really good way to say it. That's what a hosted web app, a pure hosted web app, is just that. It's just running in the context of an app, but it is an app. So, for some of you that may have said that you had been doing this, this may look familiar to you. This isn't new. This is something that you would find in the package manifest that allows you to specify what URLs are allowed, and you can either include or exclude, and there's matches that you can do. So there's nothing new here. However, if you happen to now want to, now hear me out on this, your site that's running on some server somewhere wants to be able to access the runtime on a Windows 10 device when it's running in the context of that app. Can it actually access the Windows runtime? The answer is you, the almighty developer, get to decide. You go into the rule that you create for the hosted app, and you'll say, I am going to allow all access to the Windows runtime. So what that means is there's nothing that you're excluding the app from doing to accessing any of the runtime features in the app. Now, I want to be careful here. That doesn't mean that you can bypass any capabilities or declarations that are not allowed for the context of that app, but it just means that you're leaving the door wide open for anything that is allowed. So there's one. The one that says allow for web only. What a fascinating name that is. I was not part of that naming committee. That's why I say stay tuned. Stay tuned, because there's going to be another topic I'm going to bring up later where I will tie this in and cement it for you. So now what I want you to do is think of the polar opposites here. We've got green, it's all, and then none. You can't access any of the runtime components. So that, and again, that's per rule. So every time you put a match in there to a particular domain or site, you're specifying whether it can or it cannot access the runtime. Likely it's going to be sites that you yourself own. So that's what the Windows Runtime Access attribute, that's new. That's what it does. So now we're going to talk about, like, what's an example of something you could do. So remember, the site is completely hosted who knows where. It's not relevant. What is relevant are some of the things that you might put up there. For example, you could put a VCD file, a voice command definition file, on your server. So you'd look that up to find out how to create those. But once you have it, you can then put a meta tag into your site. So either at the top of pages where it makes sense, or if you have a SPA-like or a single-page application type of a site, then you could put it in a more global area. But this declares that you would like to take advantage of Cortana integration. And then after you do that piece, then you can go into your JavaScript. Now, keep in mind, this is JavaScript that's running on the server, but is being downloaded in the hosted app. And because of that, you would be able to run this kind of script and actually integrate with Cortana. And this code actually is functional code. I'm going to show you a little later that you'd never probably want to write it just the way it is, because what if that page is running in a normal browser? Anybody have any guesses what could be an issue if you run code like this? A normal browser? Yeah, reference doesn't exist. It's like, what? You lost me at Windows, you know? So that's what it would say. So that I'm going to show you how that should be properly handled. But just know, at this point, just know that you could write this kind of code. And if you have the right if statements doing your feature detection correctly, then you can implement this and say, I will integrate. And I will have that feature available to me in my hosted app. So that is going to lead us to our first demo. I already have Visual Studio open, and I'm going to start from scratch on this first one. The first one is what I'm calling Storify. Now, in order to appreciate what I'm about to do, I'm going to go into the browser right now. I'm going to go to storify.com/Palermo4, hit enter. And if you don't know what the Storify site is, it's actually, I think it's fantastic. What it does is it allows you to filter all sorts of hashtags and aliases and tweets and build a story what happened out of all the social media. So all sorts of events that I do, I have stories for those. So that's what this site is. I did not write Storify. That's important to understand for this. This is an account I have, like you would have an account at Facebook. So I'm just happen to be on my landing page of the storify.com. So you can see that it's there. I'm going to take that URL, copy it, go back over to Visual Studio, and now I'm going to create an app. So File, New, Project. And I will move to the JavaScript world. And as I zoom in, I think it's important for you to see something here. That Microsoft loves branding. We like using words a lot. That means you might see the word universal a lot. But one universal is not like the other. So it's very important that you choose the one that does not have any 8s in it. Or else you're not really universal, like today's universal, if you know what I mean. So the one that I'm going to choose, and I'm just making this explicit for your sake, is the blank app Windows Universal. That's how we call it now. So I'm going to click that. I'll call this thing Storify app and click OK. Now, you have to keep in mind that the premise of this session is how easy it is. So I have a duty to make sure that I can follow through with that with you. So what can I do to create an app instantly? I'm going to go into my package manifest and scroll down. I'm going to see that there is a start page. Now it's currently pointing to the local default.html file, which would mean if I compiled this, whether I use it as the start page or not, any files that exist in this project are bundled together to make this a local package. But I can go in there and, oh, wait a minute. See, remember, I'm kind of sleepless in Chicago, so I got a Control V, which makes it so much easier because I don't have to type it. So I already have my start page there. Now, in addition to that, I can also go in and specify those rules that we were looking at. So if I open up, whoops, I think I chose the wrong thing here. You'll see that one of these new things that, whoops, I missed that IntelliSense. Let me try that again. Shazam. The UAP, it's a new prefix pointing to a namespace that's being declared at the top of this manifest. So I'm going to be looking at that UAP, application content URI rules. That's the one I'm going to select. So I'll do that now. UAP, application content rules. And then inside of here, I'm going to create a rule. And the rule is going to be that it's a match is going to equal what I provided before. The type it is going to equal included. And I'll just leave it like that for now. I'll demonstrate the other one here in a moment. So, you know, I'm laboring hard, you know, wiping the sweat off my face, grab a sandwich or whatever, go and rebuild this solution, and now I'm going to go ahead and run it. So this is the app. Let me show it to you here. I have the app on the screen. One of the things that's interesting here is that the developers at Storify did not know that I was going to do this. But it can be dangerous. You're right. It does lead to some interesting thoughts and questions. And all I can tell you right now is all the rules of piracy still apply in this world. So if you think you're going to go recreate the next Facebook by just putting facebook.com, you'll get in trouble because even our process for monitoring and handling the reporting of things is tightening up and getting better and better. So nothing will stop you from technically putting in any site you want, but you could be responsible and have a price to pay later on. But I'm proving a point about how easy this was. Remember, this was so easy to create. I created an app. What did you do? You know, I'll point to the C# guys. Oh, how long did that take you? You know, to build your app. Well, the other thing that's nice is if a site, and this is kind of why I chose Storify, if the site does a good job at handling responsive design, maybe it just might work good on a phone as well. Because they do a good job at responsive design. They are using CSS correctly, so it just works on all devices. Or if I expand it out, it still looks good. So, done. I'm an app developer. All right. That was cool, right? Every one of you, I can speak from experience. It will be harder for you to set up your environment than it will be to create an app. Let me just tell you. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this. I'll close the solution. And I'd like to show you something that's got a little more teeth in it. And I'd love to answer some questions. Go ahead.
Okay, let's say that I have a web application. I go to your magic and I convert it into a web app. What is the benefit of converting it into a web app?
You mean, what's the benefit of it being an app? So the benefit's like this. It's kind of like saying, Facebook, why did you create an app? Twitter, why did you create an app? You're on the web already. Think it through. Why do they create apps? Why do the banks create apps and then take them away? But then they did once. They created some apps. So the idea here is that there is an audience of all these people using devices, and they prefer apps. If there's an app, they'd rather go to the app than go to the site. Not everybody, but what's that? It's an app. You deploy it to the store. Right now, it's deployed on my machine, but I would do the same process to deploy that app as I would any other app that I build targeting the platform. And now, can run on that Xbox, can run on the phone, and can run on the Windows devices too. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. Question in the back. So what we're looking at right now, keep in mind, we're in the topic of hosted web apps, right? So in that case, I would say it's hardly different at all. It is just a shell. To some extent, it is. Now, there are some platforms that if all you do is basically put a website into a shell like that, they'll deny it. However, keep in mind, that's kind of what I'm about to show you. You're doing some good segues for me. I'll pay you later. The whole idea here is that the value add that you can bring to it would then be allowed. And in fact, there's a fruity type of a competitor that we have that actually denies that kind of stuff, but has been working with partners of ours and allowing these hosted websites because of the value add that can be brought, and it doesn't have to look like it's just the website. There's things that can be done. So thanks for the warm-up. That's good. Yes?
But also, I mean, the main value of adding a website to an app store is ultimately, I mean, you're trying to allow folks to have access to the native controls, right? I mean, because you're not going to be able to allow somebody to access, you brought up like a bank and stuff like that. I mean, typically you're wanting access to somebody's, camera or something like that so they can add more functionality, whereas a website you're not going to have.
You're absolutely correct. And that's what I'm about to demonstrate too, is how you can do that. So I think you got the right ideas. And remember, this is phase one of the session. We're just getting warmed up. Right now we're talking about just hosted, and we haven't even gotten to the local stuff yet. But the hosted stuff is it's very easy. I tell you what, it basically just needs a working site. And you don't care what language it was built in. You just, does it work? Good. Got it now. All right. Now I'm going to open up another one, and this one's got a little bit more teeth in it. I'm going to open up one that's called the Do This Thing Live. Now, this is another hosted app, okay? I'm going to show you what this URL looks like. First, I think I'll have to open up the browser again. Okay, so how many of you have heard of CodePen? Okay, so CodePen is a site, it's kind of like some of the other ones out there that allow you to magically create code on the fly and, you could do some dynamic editing of JavaScript right in the app. Now, I must have not saved the last one because I actually removed this bad boy and probably I did it over here as well, right? Nope. So I'll just get rid of this one here. I got sleepy and started talking in pirate. Okay, so I'll save this, and what I'm going to do is show you how this thing works in the context of a web browser right now. So if I click on the system prompt, I get the following message. It's a JavaScript alert in the Edge browser. So, and it knows that I'm in a browser. Now, I'll go ahead and click OK here. I'm going to minimize this window. And now I'm going to build this solution and run this. What's interesting about this is that, think about how cool this is. We're creating an app that allows you to do live JavaScript editing in the app. I feel like I'm kind of like in Inception. I'm like an app within an app within. It's crazy. So if I were to right now click this, now here's the difference. Watch this one. This was a different look. It was calling upon the native dialog box on the operating system versus what the browser would have supported. Probably would have been a lot more showy if I put Chrome up there first and showed you CodePen in Chrome. But by all means, this is editable content right now. I can go and add more things in here. I could go right at the end where, let's say even at the beginning of this call, I can do another alert. And and close that there. So remember, I'm in an app right now, and I'll go ahead and click this. Oh, did I? Should have popped up my muhahaha. Did I miss something? Missed something. Well, ignore that. Have you heard that one today? I'm not even going to try to fight that one. So, I can promise you once it did work. I mean, it was cool seeing the app do all that kind of stuff. I thought that was a really kind of interesting play that you have JavaScript running inside live within that particular app. So it just kind of shows you the power. But the other part of it, too, was that it was calling upon the native, and this is what's right here. I'll zoom in on this for you. You know, I'm calling on the Windows UI pop-ups UI command. So I'm actually instructing the app to use something that's native on the operating system. And of course, you'll see some demos coming up soon where there's more than just like a little system dialog prompt. There's some other goodies that we can do too. So I'll close that pen out and go back over to the main show. So now I want to talk briefly about our packaged JavaScript apps. Again, this would be if you've been building, have any of you deployed an app to the store written in JavaScript? Anyone here? Then you don't know what I'm talking about. It's that. It's like you bundled it all together. You know, that's why developing an app with JavaScript is a fascinating thing, because as web developers, we are so ingrained that there's a request, a response, a request, a response. And then when you have all of it together, there's no request and response. It's just do. And that almost you have to unlearn that you have state again, you know, because you have to go through that whole browser thing. Well, the packaged JavaScript apps allow for, of course, a very optimized offline experience because everything is already in the package. All of your, basically what it's doing is it has all the content there, and it's embedded. So as it's going from one HTML to the other or calling JavaScript, it was already all there. There's no call to a server and coming back. It just executes. So it's very fast. It's taking advantage, of course, in our new platform of all the new features that we have. And I'm going to be introducing to you, I think right now, this whole idea of content security policy. You see, it's a revolution to really kind of say, what are you allowed to do in these JavaScript worlds when you're trying to potentially do something that could be harmful? So Microsoft came up with some policies, but of course they weren't standardized across all the other browsers. But what's happened recently, and the reason why I have this on here, this was a significant thing for me. I think I wrote this blog post in October. I was so excited because I became a contributor, an official contributor to the whole Angular community. And my contribution was actually on this topic, because if you were to use Angular to write your apps for the store, which you could do, every once in a while I would have these issues, and I discovered it's because I was apparently doing some things in Angular that was violating certain policies. And so as long as I started to recognize those content security policies, and I even got the whole that highlighted area, Universal Windows apps, in their documentation under this NGCSP, which just made my day. But it calls to mind that you have to start recognizing that and start to basically start toggling the switches as to what you can allow or not allow. And so in order not to bore everyone, and to remember I said I want to keep this easy, I'll just let you know that as an overview, there's a lot of directives there, and you can assign what you think is appropriate for the degree or measure that you need your application to use. But on that topic, I would like to go ahead and do my next demonstration, which is going to be different than what I did before, because what I did before is I pointed to a site that was already existing. I didn't even code anything. I just said, point to that thing and make it happen. Now it's going to be opposite. It's going to be the content is already in the project, and we're just going to run it straight locally. And I will switch over to Visual Studio, close this solution here. Whoops, close solution first. And then I'm going to open up, or at least I'm going to have to open it this way. Project solution is the Contoso Travel Local. Now, once this project loads, I'm going to zoom in so you could look at the project or the Solution Explorer, and it's interesting because it's got things in there that are webby-like a web.config. In fact, this demo is literally, I just took the step out because I just wanted it to work. You know, the wowie part was if I just created an empty blank project and then copied the contents of a site that's running as an ASP.NET site and just dump it in here, which is really what we did. Now, does that work with every ASP.NET site? No. It would not work that way. You can't just say, no matter what website you're developing, you could just take that project information and just dump it in. Where it works really nice, though, is if that particular website is a single-page application or SPA-like website. If you are doing that, this is probably going to work kind of nice for you. So what I'm referring to is the idea that you have a page that serves as your initial load into the browser, but then there could be subsequent calls for more content, for you to load it in. Now, on a server, what that would mean is that the browser's constantly going back to the server to get its data, and then that's all being integrated. So if you think about it, especially if your data is coming from an external source, let's assume that your app is all there, all the HTML, all the JavaScript, all the CSS, it's all there. But what makes your app intriguing is the data that's not there. If it's a stock-like application, you need fresh data. So SPA-like applications are great for that because they can go ping, get something, bring it back without refreshing the page. Well, in an app, it works great too. Now, this is a simple demonstration, but it is a website that really ports nicely and really looks app-like. So let me go ahead and run it first so you could see what it does. So it is like this on the web, but it's really polished looking as an app. It's kind of like I want to schedule myself out of here. I need a break. So where do I want to go? Well, I'm in Chicago, so probably I'll go to Seattle to the mothership. And when do you want to go? Well, maybe I'll go this Friday, and maybe I'll come back the following Friday and confirm. Who do you want to go with? I want to be alone. Add to system calendar. Yes, I would like to add to the calendar. So I'll click on that, and I got a rethrow. Oh, I think I know why I did that. I think I got a little too fussy with my little clicking. Obviously, needs a little work. Clicked once. I think I was impatient before. I don't know why that but let me see if this works here by clicking the toast notification. So pack your bags for Seattle, leaving on Friday the 8th, May 2015 at the very bottom of the screen right there. So it's an example of a website that was also able to tap in and start to use some of the native stuff, because even though it's a site, it's also all packaged locally, and all the packaged stuff has no problem accessing all of the native stuff on our operating system. So I'll go ahead and close that particular one down and close my notification. I'm glad to know I'm leaving then. And back to the main show. Now, the web view control, if you think about what we've seen so far, if you wanted to do just a hosted web app, the easiest thing to do is to just go ahead and set that up as the starting URL in the application manifest and declare some rules, and you're done. All you have to do then is just decide to what degree will you integrate maybe some JavaScript on the server side to tap into some stuff on the client side. Well, remember I said you could go to either extreme. You could be all local, which that last one was. The first one was all remote. The web view control allows you to start to dabble into scenarios that are more hybrid. So it's kind of like a container. You can maybe even think of it to some extent conceptually as like an iframe, maybe, just sort of, within an app. It's kind of a way to look at it. It's more powerful. And the way that it renders now is better than it ever has before. It's not going to cause that word I'm thinking of, where it lags, it, holds things up. Yes, thank you. So let's look at reasons why you would want to use it. And the first thing that I would say is, this is an example, a reminder to me to say, do your checking if you're going to be, let's say, using JavaScript code to call on this web view control or to do anything. Make sure that you're also doing your feature detection. Is there a Windows off of window? If there is, and then you should probably, if you're going to do things really well, you should also be checking application model and so forth to make sure. You've probably seen that code before where you're making sure that it exists before you call it, but once you do that, you should be able to use things okay. Now, this is just kind of like that example of feature detection. But now, we're going to get into a very interesting part of the web view control, and that's this thing called an add web allowed object. Again, wasn't on the naming committees. Now, what this is saying is, before this very intriguingly named thing, we had to do a lot of weird things. If we had something running in the context of that web view, and the outer part of the app wanted to communicate with the inner part of that web view and vice versa, we had to do some, funky maneuvers, and that's what we're seeing on the screen here. But now it's kind of like you hear the bells and the angels singing, because with this add web allowed object, we've made it so much easier for you to communicate back and forth. And I will be able to show you that in code. It is a lot easier. It's way easier. So remember back when I was showing you those three options, the all, none, and allow for web only? So that's why I think this is an interestingly named thing, because this thing is all about this thing that we just talked about. So let me rephrase that. Allow for web only is really about this web view allowing web stuff API call. So that's why later on I just call it allow web thingy, and you'll know what I mean by that. Allow web thingy. So here's an example of some code, and I'll explain why we have that middle layer here. Toast class, this new notification toast class, is calling a C# injected component, runtime component. So, in fact, those first couple lines of code are actually in C#. They're not in JavaScript. So it's creating an instance of a toast class, and it's going to the web view. Now, in this context, that means there's a web view that's being used in the XAML. So someone's not using JavaScript for their local package. They're actually using XAML, and they're calling this add web allowed object. And here's the secret sauce to these final two things that you see on that line. The thing in quotes is, how do we want to call it in JavaScript? And the thing that's not in quotes is the instance of that runtime object. So they happen to be named the same, which makes it easy to relate those two. Then somewhere in the JavaScript on some page within the web view, remember you don't have a web view for XAML, you have a web view for web stuff. So in the web view, if there's JavaScript in there, you can create an instance of this C# thingy inside of your JavaScript, as long as you're calling it from the name that you put in the quotes, this notification thing. So I'm going to go back one slide and say, here's the reason for this little setting. The reason is you want to control what things can be accessed, because through that C# object, You're controlling the API. You're a middle layer. So really the way to look at it is that third object means I'm a control freak. I like to inject my own components to control what can be accessed in the runtime, and I'll just do it my way. That's what allow for web only means. It means allow for web through me. That's what it really means. It does not mean that only web content can be served. It's kind of a strange name. But it just means you're using this add web allowed object API. That's what it means, that you're controlling what can be done. If you put it to all, everything can be accessed by their code. Now it has to use your code to get to stuff, and that's why it's there. What are some other cool new things? A common concern that some devs had when they were creating apps is not having the ability within the web view to clear cache or cookies or things like that, and now we have an API that makes that possible. So you can remove through this temporary web data async, and voila, your stuff has disappeared. Another one is the ability to control the settings, the context of what's happening in the web view. Maybe you want to call on something, but you want to disable the JavaScript or not allow for, or allow for IndexedDB stuff. So you're in control of that as well. The other thing that you could do also is you can be involved programmatically about the permissions that are going on. In this example, it's regarding a geolocation. If it's a request for that, then you are allowing that request to occur. Now, this is probably the one that has the most meaning to a lot of developers that have been using the web view and have encountered a situation. The situation is this. If you click on a hyperlink in a web view and it says target equals underscore blank, what do you think the behavior is? If you're in the app, in the web view, what do you think it might do? It actually opens up a browser, whatever their default browser is. So it takes them, bye-bye app, sniff, sniff. Somehow we left that experience behind and we're in a whole new world. So you go search. It's interesting. I better write a blog post on this soon because no one's written about this one yet. Because everyone keeps asking at Stack Overflow, how do I make it so it doesn't do that? And all the answers are, it is forbidden, 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 forbidden. And that's literally all the answers are, you can't. And now you can. Because all you have to do is this little thing down here that's just called prevent default, which means you get an access to, so that thing says let me get an instance of the web view. Let me go ahead and listen to this finely named thing called MS Web View New Window Requested, and go to this function down here. If I say e.preventDefault, it means do not do the default behavior of opening up in a browser. Instead, you get to choose what it would do. So if I just left e.preventDefault, what it'll do is nothing, which is maybe not good, or maybe it is what you want. But what I did instead is I said, let's go ahead and navigate to the URI that was being originally requested within the web view, which is what everybody usually wants. Click on this link, stay in the web view, don't open up a browser. Does that make sense? Let's get into the web thingy. Let me show it to you. So I'm going to close this solution, and I will open up the project that's all about the allowed object off of the web view. I think it's important to know, too, that all the principles of what we're talking about, even though most of the code that you're seeing me do is all JavaScript, if someone were doing this in a C# XAML world, all these principles still apply. In fact, In most cases, the names are almost identical, except one might have a capital letter and one might have a lowercase letter at the beginning, but it's almost all the same. Remember, what's in a web view is always web stuff, but the app that's containing the web view can be a C# app. It doesn't have to be a JavaScript app, is what I'm saying. In this example, it is a JavaScript app that is calling yet a web view with JavaScript stuff in it. However, I put all of these tabs in order because I knew I might be a little delirious today with a lack of sleep. So I'm so glad I did that. The application manifest over here shows that my start page is going to this default.html. I'm letting you know that that's a local file inside of this particular project. So I'm going to go there, and then you're going to see that it has inside of it an instance of this web view. You know, a web view is not a W3C thingy. It is a Microsoft thingy. So we have our own coding for that special web view. If this were XAML, then there's this XAML web view. So you know that its ID is this. Now it's calling upon the default JS file, and the default JS file lets us intercept the event whenever this thing starts to navigate. What do we want to do? So basically, you could do whatever you want, but this one here is just allowing us to say, if you happen to be calling upon something that's local inside of this package, not outside but inside, then let's go to this injected component toast WinRT. So what's that? Well, that's the next slide, or the next page. This is C# code that is in a project that's being referenced down here. So we're creating an instance of this toast WinRT component in here. And when we put the add web allowed object, we're saying this instance of this C# object will now be called in our JavaScript communicator WinRT. That's how we're going to reference it. Now, this other thing is that, hey, if the window is requested, a new window, like it's going to pop out and go to a browser, do we want to intercept that and do something different? So I had a breakpoint in here on purpose because I wanted to show what would happen if I were to uncomment it. And I'm a little schizophrenic because I'm daring myself. Go ahead, do it. And I will, but I want to run it first. But before I run it, I also want you to see what would prompt it to do that. There's these underscore blank things in here that are going to force, if you don't do anything about that. If you want that behavior for it to open in a browser, you want to do that. Target equals blank. That'll get the job done. But maybe I want to click on this new requested window option and not have it open in another browser. And then finally, in the page.js, the whole thing kind of culminates to that C# object that was injected that we call communicator WinRT. I've now created a reference to it, and I'm calling the toast message, which means this is my way of saying I can interact with the underlying operating system through that C# object that I'm now manipulating in my JavaScript code. This JavaScript code is running in the context of that web view. See, it's kind of crazy here, but we have an application that's JavaScript that's creating a web view inside of itself and loading dynamic content into itself. So it's a way for the two worlds to communicate together. Well, let's see what happens when I run this thing. So I have my little web demos, and what I want to do is see if the notification will work. It's supposed to pop, it'll appear in the lower right-hand side of the screen. So there is my moo-ha-ha-ha-ha. So it looks like it worked. Now I want to click on this new window requested. This is the target blank. Let's see what it does. Well, it's going to take me to that prevent default. I just want to let you see that it called it. When I continue, I'll go back to the app. Where is it? There it is. And now it's loading that page inside of the web view. It did not open up a browser. But remember, I dared myself. So I'm going to close this, stop this here, and I'm now going to, well, it says uncommented, but I'm actually going to comment it. That again proves a little bit of a delirious nature. So Control-Shift-S, I'm going to save it all. I will actually rebuild to make sure that that takes place. And I'll take the breakpoint off as well because it'll obviously not stop on a comment, but also I want you to see the full-blown effect. So I run this in local machine. I'll go instantly to new window requested. Ooh, it popped up a browser. That's horrible. That's the thing everyone doesn't want to have happen. I showed the good part first and then the evil part later, but you get the idea. Okay. All right. So just going to start the final descent here on tooling. And basically, the tooling discussion is very simple. You've probably heard of Cordova. Anybody in here hear of Cordova? How many of you have heard of PhoneGap? Any, same thing, basically. FYI, if you didn't know. So Cordova allows you to have code stored locally, like a local package. It also allows you to host, like we've seen earlier. The other thing it allows you to do is to embed multiple instances of itself within a native area as well, like you have these multiple iframe type of experiences. So this is more of just like a heads-up feature for Cordova. The one that's probably very intriguing that I'm really excited to talk to you about is this Manifold.js. Now, let's just say that you went the route of you want to use the hosted web. This is about hosted web apps, so we're kind of going back to that story. But you want that hosted web app to run everywhere. And what I mean by that is you want that app in iOS, in their app store, you want Android, you want the Play, you want Windows, you want all. You go to Manifold.js, and it makes your life wonderful. Now, it recommends that you have Node installed, and then you could do this npm install Manifold.js. Now, this is a loaner device I have because I broke devices in the last 24 hours. So I don't have Node installed, but what I can show you is that you don't need to have it installed. Let me explain. I'm going to go ahead and open up the browser to manifoldjs.com. So before I do the one thing, let me show you this, the deploy. I love sites when they just spill things out for me. If I wanted to go into Windows, this is what I do. If I wanted to go to Android, this is what I do. If I wanted to go to iOS, this is what I do. Anything that doesn't take a full screen is always good for me. It always feels nice and comfortable that the steps do not exceed the scrolling of the screen. Every one of these is like that. Now, here's the idea. Let me go generate. So let's say that I want to make an app out of my blog, Palermo4.com. And I'll click on Get Started. This is what I love about this. It went and examined it, and now it's got, check this out, suggestions and warnings. And it's very easy to go into all the text boxes that are over here and understand some of the principal things that need to go into this application manifest. Now, what they're doing is when you fill in all these blanks pointing to this hosted web app, and once you have everything good and you've read all these warnings or the missing images for this platform, once you get it all aligned, it generates every package for every platform for you. So again, this is for hosted web apps. But now you have the thing that Apple wants, you have the thing that Google wants, you have the thing that Microsoft wants, all from this site. Have any of you seen this before? I'll admit I never saw it before I was told to talk about it. And I love it. Like, this is great. This makes hosted web apps easy to deploy as apps to every single one of the platforms. So this is one you'll definitely want to look at. It's a good one. Now, you could do it online like I'm doing here, or you can also run it locally if you have Node installed, and you can run a few things and it'll just like do a and just automate and spit out all the folders with all the goodies in there for you. So that is on that. Here is my summary slide. Basically, the whole theme of this whole session was it shouldn't feel hard to use JavaScript to create apps in our new Universal Windows platform or the way that we're moving forward with this one way on Windows 10. But you should have also seen that you could use JavaScript to get to things that are not Microsoft. So it's not just about using it to just deploy to our platform. We think you'll do great if you do, but you'll be able to use it everywhere else too. So with all the improvements that were made, and most of the code samples that you saw really were just default blank solutions with a few additions to there. It really should be easier in order to use JavaScript. So I'll right now take a few questions. I have to say I'm shocked that I went as long as I did. I thought I'll go 35 minutes and then die, but this actually went well. Yes?
The main difference between the hosted and the package is if you don't have internet hostable.
So the question up front was, the main difference is between hosted and the local package is one can work without the internet and the other one requires the internet. You're absolutely right.
What happens when there is no internet?
If you're opening up a hosted web app, you need to have there's things that you could do within that. So it's kind of like a little bit, you're adding a little local code in order to say what to do. Yes. Good question. Yeah, good question. Yes. That's a great question. The major difference is Xamarin is actually creating compiled code that runs natively on that platform. This one is still using the web hosting model, but at least it's creating all of those packages for you for those respective platforms. But that's a great question. That's where Xamarin reigns, is with all the tight integration to the actual native platform, and it usually has a much more look and feel of that platform too. So hats off to Xamarin for that. This would be for that solution where you already got the web stuff and you want that really fast app experience and you want it to be easily updatable. So that's a great question. And the funny thing is I halfway know the answer. And I know that sounds funny, but my synaptic connection kind of flipped. I would want to get your contact information because I know that I can answer that. Right. Yeah, the node just went away, but I know there is an answer for that. Yes? Well, the app part is the site the website that's hosted. All we're doing is creating the packages that wrap around that site that's being hosted. That's correct. Yes, so that you have something that you could deploy to each one of those. So Apple wants a certain way, Microsoft wants a certain way, Google wants a certain way, so that's what it does.
And the green answer and red settings, right? That applies to both web views and the hosted apps as well, right? Can we have that?
Yes, the answer is yes. Yeah, it applies to both. Thank you for asking that. Yes?
On the hosted app, would it be possible to operate the website? Say username password I want to enter automatically every time the user invokes the app.
The question was again on the hosted web app, the what again?
I want to enter the username and password automatically. Would it be possible?
Oh, you're saying, is there a way that you can have kind of like a remember me type of a scenario within the app? So the answer is yes. Yeah, because you still have access to local storage mechanisms and cookies and things like that. And however that you would want to persist that, you could. But you got to be careful about security settings too. Got to throw in that little piece. Anything else? Yes?
So for a local app, can you create it directly in Visual Studio? And if yes, can you do it for Android as well without Xamarin?
So think of it this way. Yes, you could create the local app within Visual Studio. I think I see what you're saying now. You're saying if you have the local package that contains the local content, but then you want to deploy that to an Android environment. So that answer would be no. So it's the hosted web apps that you could use like the Manifold and get those easily targeting. At this time, the local packages would just work universally across our platform.
And you were using 2012,
2015, RC. You have to have the latest version, yeah. Yes?
So if you have an intranet that uses like ADFS as an example, and you want to get some apps out, you would have to put in the manifest to both the trust source
Mm-hmm.
and the intranet. Would it work? Would it authenticate? Like, because in the web it does, so I'm assuming it would.
Yes.
But I mean, I still have to test.
Yes, it does. In fact, at Microsoft, a lot of the things that we had as intranet sites for our internal stuff, we mostly have apps now that are provided through like our eat our own dog food kind of a platform. So it's absolutely something that you can do. And you know, whether you use a side loading approach or set up your own little store per se for your internal, that's the two different approaches you can make. An IT person can set one of those up so that it's the go-to place for all your company type company portal is what I was trying to think. Yes.
Hopefully there's a good answer for this.
Uh-oh.
Can the web view control be distributed to non-Windows 10 computers?
Can the web view be distributed to non-Microsoft computers?
Web view control is actually reaching into Edge HTML.dll. Actually, maybe I should rephrase that to computers without the Edge browser in it.
Right. So that's a great question. Everything we talked about is that utilizes the controls the way they are would work on our platform. So the only thing that really works outside of that is when you're utilizing the web hosted scenario, which does not require anything. So it utilizes the underlying operating system like the Edge if it's there. I think the answer to that is it depends, and that's where synaptic connection's going off. You may be able to pull it off by the way that it's managed, but I think there's a couple scenarios that it wouldn't work. So that's why I'm like, well, I'd have to test it. I'd have to make sure, but I think there might be one.
What you showed us, the web view control is such an improvement over the web browser control.
Absolutely, it is, and much more control over it too. Any other questions? Yes, please. So if you're using a web-hosted app, it is using the it is doing that back and forth. It is absolutely doing the back and forth. If you're creating a local package, it doesn't need to download the markup and the CSS and the JavaScript because it's already there. It just needs to make API calls to get data that usually comes across as JSON, and then it just gets dynamically bound to HTML content that's template-like that you already have locally. Good question.